right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming in. This is a lunch and learn with Boulder BCycle, and we have Kevin Kraus here. So he's going to chat with us a little bit about like one of the micromobility options available in Boulder. We have some pre-generated questions just to kind of spark the conversation, but also like at the end, he has a short presentation, and then at the end we can open it up. If anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. Kevin, do you want to give a little intro or just
Sure.
right in?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Kevin Kraus, and I'm the general manager of the Boulder BCycle electric bike share program here in Boulder. I'll open up the presentation in just a second to start going through that. But basically what we do is offer electric bikes at stations throughout Boulder. It's designed around short-term use, kind of like a bicycle transit system within Boulder. So we structure our passes to be for trips of usually like an hour or less, and they're station to station trips throughout Boulder. I'll go ahead and share my screen here to go through a presentation. Can everyone see a slide with a bunch of bikes at a station?
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. Well, this is right downtown in Central Park in Boulder, our 13th and Arapahoe station that serves Central Park area, farmers market, all sorts of events down along the creek path. And I'll just go through, I prepared like an agenda for this slideshow. There we go. To go through the history of the program, like how we got where we are today, some of the impacts the program has had along the way, talk about our equity programs, some safety elements of the program, and then where we're going in the future, and leave room for questions. And actually, a quick question for Melissa: is there a hard time limit that I need to make sure to observe?
We have generally an hour. It probably won't take the whole time, but you know, if the conversation is going, we can go for the whole hour, but no real hard and fast deadline for you.
That's great. This presentation most definitely won't take the whole time, so there'll be plenty of room for conversation. I guess for those, if anyone is not familiar with what the program looks like today, this photo in the slideshow happens to show our current version of pedal assist electric bikes at one of our newer versions of stations. And then I also included in this photo a picture of a cargo bike that we began using for some system maintenance as we try to do basically more of our system maintenance by e-bike and less by gas-powered van or truck. So to run through the kind of quick history here, Boulder BCycle as a bike share system launched in May of 2011. So we just actually recorded our 12th year anniversary here. That makes us one of the longest running bike share systems in the country. And we'll touch upon that just a little bit later. We launched as part of a nonprofit that had been organized called Boulder Bike Sharing. That was kind of how a very popular model to use at the time, and still is in some places. Launched under kind of the city was interested in seeing a bike share program come to fruition. They knew they did not want to own and operate it themselves. And so a nonprofit stepped forward and was formed to do that. I'm really glossing over in bullet point 2, 5 years of program growth and expansion. We grew, the system grew a lot during that time, the number of stations in the area we serve, as well as the number of bikes on the street. And it was kind of an important time because we were sourcing as a nonprofit federal grants to grow to that size and buy the equipment. And then the ridership basically followed, but the system had to grow first. Ridership remained relatively low in those first years. And I have a later slide that looks at that ridership growth over time. These last 3 years, I would say, have been defined by electrifying the whole fleet. It was in 2021 that we reached full fleet electrification. And then also our program with the University of Colorado Boulder has grown enormously in the last few years. And basically student bus and bike fees pay for all students to have free access to electric bike share here in Boulder. And that has been the primary driver of system increase. but we have also seen some growth in other areas. And then really, from a timestamp of today, where we are and still in the first half of 2023, we are over 1.6 million lifetime trips, meaning in the last 12 years. And what's kind of exciting is it took us over 10 years to reach that first million trips. We think that the second million trips are really on track to happen in just over 2 years, maybe even under. So it's likely that we'll have our second million trips hit that milestone before the end of this calendar year. And as I had mentioned, we're one of not only the longest running, but at this point, most used on a per bike basis bike share programs in the country. The bike share program in the US that most people are familiar with is the City bike share program. That program is enormous in size, and even though we've gotten busier, some of their busy days are busier than our entire year. But we've still grown in use quite a bit. And on a per bike basis, how much every one of our now over 300 e-bikes are ridden, we rank up there, honestly, somewhat comparable with New York City, certainly depending on what time of year you're looking at. Melissa, is there any preference if I stop along the way for questions, or if it's best to go through the whole presentation?
Maybe we'll save the questions for the end, if that's all right.
Sounds good. Okay. Here's some of that ridership growth over time. You can see back when we first, and this is being measured in hundreds of thousands, are the horizontal lines. When we started back in 2011, I think our first year had like 25, or maybe even fewer than 25,000 trips. And that was on a smaller fleet, non-electric bikes. If anyone remembers all of our pedal bike fleet, those were in service for some of them more than 10 years, and on average mileage per bike crossed the country at least twice. But all the way back then, that was kind of what utilization looked like at that time. As I said, from like 2012 through 2017, we were really growing the system size. And then you can see where there was this lag, and utilization didn't really kick off until like 2015, 2016. And then we held kind of constant in this between 100 and 110,000 trips a year until we again expanded the system size and electrified the bikes and grew our program with the University of Colorado Boulder. And in these last couple of years, that's kind of what's accounting for these big year-over-year increases. And the 2023 column is just year-to-date really so far. So we're, on track to exceed 2022's trips this year. I wanted to comment a little bit on the equity programs that we have up and running today. The Boulder Housing Partners program is a neat one that we actually coordinated with BHP, and they submitted a grant application last year to make all Boulder BCycle passes fully free for all BHP residents, at least through the end of this year. And it's working pretty well. It's neat to work with Boulder Housing Partners because they're very organized in terms of how they can present this information to residents. They are a grant eligible entity that can look for this sort of funding. So we hope to keep that one going. We don't have up and running yet, though I'm hoping to make that same sort of connection with Thistle, and hopefully grow that program to include Thistle residents as well. We also, starting a couple of years ago, we have what's called our Library Pass program, where Boulder BCycle system passes are actually available for checkout on the shelf at the main library here in Boulder. So anyone with library access can check out one of those Boulder BCycle fobs. They need to complete our online waiver in order for us to activate the fob. But then at that point, for a week at a time, they can have this system access fob, take as many trips as they want. They need to follow the same sort of rules as our other pass types, which is keeping every trip short, under an hour. But it's a way for people to access the program at no cost. It does not require use of a mobile phone, does not require use of a credit card. And for some populations, it's also important to note that program can be completely anonymous. We optionally request that people give us their email address simply so that we can notify them when we've activated the fob they have in their possession, but they're not required to. And so consequently, we don't know with precision how many different people are using that program on a given month or year. But we know that it's had several hundred people use it since it launched. And then finally, we have our general low-cost access program, which is our normal cost of an annual pass for this program is $150. That gets you an entire year of access, during which you can take as many trips that are up to 60 minutes in duration. Take as many of those trips as you want to. You know, some people ride a couple times a month, some people ride a couple times a day, some people ride very just seasonally or only when they're in town. But we discount that $150 annual pass down to $40. At present, we're not requiring any proof of eligibility for that. We are just asking people to write us and request a promotion code through that program. You know, and I think I'll make the comment here too, that we have other passes I have highlighted so far that you can pay on a per trip basis to use the system. You can also buy everything up to an annual pass. We also have a monthly pass in the middle there that has no monthly commitment. So if someone were to decide they wanted to use the program a month at a time, take as many trips as they want in that month's time, that's something that people could turn on and off or join for 3 months and then discontinue. We have a few different ways of accessing the program, but all structured around taking short trips station to station. Oh, you know what? I didn't have a slide about this one, but I wanted to comment on our sort of system safety initiatives. The big one that people always want to talk about is helmets. And we do not provide helmets for the system. We certainly encourage people to wear them. But BikeShare has, like automated BikeShare like this, has tried automated helmet like vending and cleaning stations that were not found to be successful. We've also provided in the past helmet discounts for new riders and found that they weren't very well used. So honestly, what we do at present is we just stock a limited number of helmets in our office, and riders are able to, whether they're coming in through an equity program or not, if for some reason they do not have or are not able to get their own helmet, we can provide one for them. So it's more of an informal program. We have helmets available. And BikeShare as a whole, including here in Boulder, has a really good track record of safety. We report, because we operate under a contract with the city of Boulder, we report on all of our basically any incidents that are communicated to us. And I believe that when we last reported to the city, I think we had 3 reported incidents in the previous calendar year over about 500, a little under 500,000 bike trips. And I'll make a few comments too about where we are now and where we're headed. I put on here more electrification, and that simply means we want to expand the number of bikes in our electric fleet, but that we're also trying to electrify our own service of our fleet. Right now, we're operating 2 gas-powered vehicles that you may see out and around Boulder, a box truck and a Sprinter van. And BCycle as a company is in line to purchase electric versions of some of those vehicles as they become available. That's included for us some coordination with potential sites where we could charge those vehicles in case our shop capacity wasn't sufficient. We charge all of our e-bike batteries at our shop and then bring them out into the field to swap them on bikes. And that is something that starting a few months ago, we've started to do using a large electric cargo bike that I'll show on the final slide of the presentation. But it's really neat because it's enabling us to be more nimble getting around town and enabling us most days to only have 1 gas-powered vehicle in service at a time. And then this one isn't quite as relevant for this particular group of presentation, but there's an exciting state level bill that is incentivizing employer, call it alternative transportation programs, and BikeShare is specifically included. And we're hoping to grow some of our employer BikeShare programs. This is where an employer could actually qualify for a tax credit by providing BikeShare as a benefit to employees, either for commuting purposes or just to try to, it could also be for health reasons, or to try to reduce the instance of employees using cars during the day to get around if they're already in town. And finally, in this presentation, I have that we're in the middle of a kind of year-long regional feasibility study with Commuting Solutions. They're the Regional Transportation Management Organization and have funding through the Denver Regional Council of Governments to explore the expansion of Boulder BCycle to other cities, really as far north and east as like Longmont and Erie, all the way down through Superior, Broomfield, Westminster. And really what we're just trying to identify at this point are promising areas for expansion, whether those are along the existing main corridors throughout the region, in prominent denser residential areas, in denser employment areas. And we're hoping to wrap up that study by later this year and hopefully put forward some sort of roadmap by which we think bike share could expand throughout the region. So on the final slide here, I'll put up this picture of this bike I mentioned. Beautiful sunset we captured one day, but this is a newer electric cargo bike we've started using. And in that large case are actually 22 BCycle batteries that we can take out into the field and swap them out into bikes, carrying the batteries by bike instead of by vehicle. And that's one way we're basically trying to increase the number of our battery swaps that we're doing by bike and decrease our use of our vehicles. So my contact information is on here. Again, my name's Kevin Kraus. I'm the general manager of the Boulder BCycle program. There's my email address. You are also welcome to reach us. Our general customer service address is simply boulder at BCycle.com. So why don't I stop sharing my screen for a moment and we can open it for questions. And I also have some other comments I could show, like some things on our website if that ends up being beneficial.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. It was pretty cool to see that that chart you had with like the ridership basically just going straight up. Like that's very exciting to hear for you guys and for Boulder in general.
It is.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thanks for saying that, Melissa. I'll comment on that. Like, I highlighted that Boulder has one of the longer running bike share systems in the country. It's also pretty unusual for a city of a little over 100,000 people to have really any shared micromobility at all. There are plenty of cities that are 100,000, 200,000 people that either don't have any options or have a very small or seasonal program. I've actually been working in the industry the entire time and at Boulder BCycle for the entire 12 years we've been in operation, and very few examples I can think of, certainly examples that have a true winter as we do here. Very few examples that have this sort of program on an ongoing basis.
Right. Yeah. I'm willing to open it up to the crowd if anyone has any clarifying questions or questions that you definitely want answered, and then I can come in and sprinkle a couple other questions in as well. Jen, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I'm a wheelchair user, but I was wondering if Boulder BCycle, whatever, has any plans for getting adaptive bikes.
Thanks for asking that, Jen. The short answer as of today is that we don't have plans to add any adaptive bikes into the system, meaning bikes that are available for checkout at stations. But I've personally been interested for a while in seeing if Boulder BCycle could have a role in starting an adaptive bike library here in town or in the region. The best example I can think of that to me seems like it might be good for this area is something that Portland, Oregon runs. So they have their bike share system. They also have a bike library that the bike share system participates in, but the city is also involved. And they do it more like this bike library lending model. I think one thing that would be neat is that we could have bikes then potentially at a location for pickup, but maybe our role could include delivering those bikes for a period of time. And so that would include, could include tandems, whether those are inline or side-by-side, hand cycles, any sort of three-wheeled tricycles. I can say like industry-wide, I know three-wheeled trikes have been piloted in some places. I guess to put it most directly, the hard part was making sure that those bikes or trikes or whatever they were available for the people who needed them at the times and places where they were needed, because necessarily by putting one of those vehicles on the street, it would become available for any system user. And the priority is making sure that the people who needed them most would have access to them. And depending on how it's deployed, having vehicles generally available within the system may not be the best way to get there.
Okay, that sounds great if we could do it, but I understand.
Yeah, it's really exciting to think about. And I think that adaptive bikes, trikes, other vehicles have been available for a while, but the explosion of, I guess I shouldn't use the term explosion, the proliferation of electric devices is what really makes it exciting and makes it that much more accessible for more people.
Oh, yep.
I'm seeing a couple in the chat. Jessica asked if you could give a little bit more information about how people without a credit card or an email can use BCycle, and that she really appreciates the equity effort that's made.
Thanks. And I didn't put a slide about this in the presentation, as I thought it might be more helpful to talk through. So we do have ways for people to use the system without a credit or a debit card. I guess one thing to point out is that we do allow the use of some prepaid cards. So someone without a card could potentially buy a prepaid card. That said, those same cards are our most frequent fraudulent use case. So we do sometimes block classes of those cards when we notice that they're problematic or bikes are being stolen using them. So it's not the best way. The library pass program, as I mentioned, does not require the use of a credit card. And then for either for our BHP or low cost access program, our request is that people join through the BCycle app, though that does require the use of a credit card. That's primarily so that they'll have the app as a way of not only checking out bikes, but also seeing the status of the system, where bikes are available, where docks are available. But we can work around that and give somebody an RFID key fob or card so that we can basically create a version of an account that does not require a credit card on file. And we just do that on a case-by-case basis whenever requested.
Cool. And if people were interested in pursuing that, they just would reach out to you guys?
Yeah. Let me put it into the chat here, but really the best way of doing that is simply to write us. And I'll put our email address in the chat.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yep, that's our general customer service email address, but that'll get you in, and we can route it internally to like create that RFID fob, create one of those separate accounts that does not require use of a credit card.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, and then I guess it's worth mentioning that the way someone uses the system with one of those cards is how, in a pre-app era, how everyone used this system, which is that you walk up to a station, every dock, though there are a few different styles, have a small button you push to basically wake up the dock, and then you move the card in the area of that RFID reader, and it unlocks the bike. So it basically skips the use of a phone at all. It doesn't create a mobile account or an app account that you just use differently. It just skips the use of a mobile device at all.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Angel was curious if you could talk a little bit more about the regional bike share feasibility study and if you are planning on expanding beyond the city of Boulder.
Yeah, that's the hope. So yeah, that's going on this year. It's Commuting Solutions that has a grant to study it. Starting next month, we'll actually start doing some demo events. I think we'll be doing those July, August, and September, maybe into October. We'll be doing demo events in every city in this Commuting Solutions region in the Northwest metro area. But the hope there is to identify promising areas for bike share expansion. We're also putting together some scenario planning, everything from if operating money and capital funding were no object at all, where could we have the biggest social and environmental impact by bringing bike share? And then everything back to, okay, well, what's really smart? What kind of maybe stands to make the greatest impact in terms of reduction in single occupancy vehicle usage, increases in mobility in certain parts of the region, and try to put together some potential paths forward. I think it's clear to say from the beginning that now that we own and operate bike share purely privately in Boulder, we either need to make sure that we're expanding in areas and ways where the costs that will recover our costs from doing it, or make sure we've identified other funding streams that can make sure that bike share is, a long-term dependable transportation option in a new area. So the hope is to expand beyond the city of Boulder. I think the Boulder region's really unique in part because there's so much regional flow amongst all the
Mhm.
cities in this area. And there's also so much effort being made to enhance the regional connections along the major routes, including the bike connections along those routes. So I guess that's kind of one of the neat things about being a long time program, is that we've started to get folded into longer term efforts where it's going to be years before there's a bike, a bike path all the way to Longmont from Boulder. But we're really grateful and happy to be part of the planning efforts now, so that hopefully bike share is implemented as that is built out.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I hope the study goes well, and I hope you guys get what you're hoping to get out of the study and get some yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can mention that as part of that study, there will be not only those in-person demo events in every city in the region, but then also a survey that the individual cities will be putting out. And certainly we would intend, when the survey is live, to communicate to Mobility for All and ask if there's willingness to help share that survey, so that people can share their thoughts and inputs about where bike share would be most useful, what sort of trips you might want to use it for, all of those sorts of things.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely share that with our peeps. Like, I think that would be awesome. I think people are very enthusiastic about it. Let's see.
I see Wesley's question
Yeah,
about breakdowns in the columns by categories.
Mm-hmm.
Those are different pass types, Wesley. And we've changed our pass types a little bit over the year. So I didn't show the legend because we'd somewhat be comparing apples to oranges year over year. For example, we've always had an annual pass to the program, though its cost has changed. We've always had an annual pass that lets people take as many trips as they want throughout the course of a year. We haven't always had a monthly pass. We've had a week pass at some points in our past, but don't have one today. We've also had a day pass in the past that gave someone 24 hours of system access. And at present, earlier this year, we discontinued that pass in favor of just pay per trip, really pay per half hour of system use, because while it was a great option for somebody who was in town temporarily to use the system heavily for a day, it was over a long period of time our most misunderstood pass. And people understood it to be 24 hours of bike rental and would just keep a bike for 24 hours or more. And so we have tried to simplify our pass structure so that someone coming in as what we call a casual user, maybe they've never used it before, maybe they use it 3 times a year, that they really understand that they're just paying per half hour of use. You don't even need to know the cost or the rules of a monthly or annual pass. So those categories really show different pass types, but I didn't label them all on there because it's comparing pass types year over year that we don't, some of which have been retired and some of which are newer.
Thank you. Joni asked if you have a regular newsletter for the communication about possible expansion. If you don't, we could definitely, any sort of future communications, you could just reach out to Mobility for All and we'll spread it in our network. But if you had one.
Well, Melissa, thank you for offering to help spread the word. We actually don't regularly send out a newsletter. It was something we used to do monthly. And we found that while we had a pretty long list, we had a relatively low readership kind of as a percentage of that list. So we've I wouldn't say we've discontinued it. It's that we're only sending out that newsletter to all of our riders when we really feel like we have something important to announce or let them know about. We're working to increase our channels for communicating with people through the BCycle app, which we hope would let people be a little more selective about what sort of news they want to receive. Everything from, critical, this station is down because of construction in the area, where if you're a regular system user, you might really care about that. Or if you're a few times a year user, you might not want to receive those sort of updates. So we're trying to, some app updates are pending that we hope will better enable us to kind of segment our news that we're pushing out to people. But certainly with regard to this survey I mentioned that Commuting Solutions is putting together around regional bike share feasibility, I would love to get that out to everybody in this group and through Mobility for All. So Melissa, thank you for offering that.
Okay, cool. Jessica asked if there was any sort of Spanish contact at BCycle, for Spanish speaking families or monolingual Spanish speaking folks in Boulder.
Yeah, that I'm really glad to say that that is improving a fair amount. I believe, though I haven't tried it recently myself, our website should have some translation features. Certainly those have been more fully enabled in the app, in the BCycle app. So based on your phone's language setting, it should display in either English or Spanish. Once people are on board as riders, oh, and I guess one more comment about that is if there are Spanish speakers or dual language speakers here who notice faults, failures, anything incorrect, please let us know. We want to make sure we're fixing that and providing accurate translations all the time. With regard to like rider support and customer service, we utilize a bike share specific call and text center, and they provide bilingual English-Spanish support via phone or text at our same public phone number during these same hours that they provide English language support. So anybody as a rider can reach out to us. And then those of us who are handling things at the local level here, I'm usually able to speak Spanish enough for people to help figure out local specific issues as needed, and then can pull in some other requests for translation assistance again as needed. So I would say it's better than it has ever been. Every new development in the app is done with multiple languages in mind, and yet it still has room to grow.
Cool. Cami asked, is it safe to assume that you would be expanding the staffing to expand programming, or are any funding sources to support electrification programs supporting staff to do more programming? Wondering if how big of a concern staffing is to pull off your great goals and visions.
For the last part of the question, how big a concern is staffing? It's really big. It's everything. This has been consistent during the 10+ years we ran as a local nonprofit, and that carries forward into today's. We're a really small team. We're at 12 people now, a mix of full and part-time. And that's 12 people who so far this year have provided over 200,000 bike share trips to more than 13,000 unique riders. So there's this really big multiplier effect in terms of what our staff are able to do here. But at the same time, we have to be really focused. And so I guess, Cameron, if you're able to jump in, I would love to ask a little bit more precisely what you mean about programming. I'm wondering if you mean like attending events in person or doing safety education.
Sorry, yeah, I just meant whether that meant expanding your bikes or getting different kinds of bikes, whatever you would consider your programming. Just want to see and I guess I had a follow-up question about how we can support your goals beyond riding your bikes. How can we help support you be able to reach these missions? So that was kind of a later question. So maybe they can be connected now.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. That helps. Yeah, in terms of our efforts here, like all of our staff in Boulder on the ground are really focused on like running the system we have today, fixing the bikes we have today, and keeping them charged and maintained. I think of that we have a need to work even more closely with partner entities. We do a lot with the city of Boulder because they're here, but also Boulder Transportation Connections because they're in the city of Boulder. As we aspire to grow, we basically need to grow that network of partner organizations. Mobility for All is definitely an important entity for us to work with. And I think that we know it will be asking for support from and hopefully connecting with entities in any new regions and even new populations within Boulder where we have no relationship to start, and we need to reach a new group of people. I'll give the example of some stations that we've recently installed in East Boulder along Valmont that are immediately adjacent to 2 mobile home parks. And those are areas where we've wanted to expand, and that the city also required shared micromobility providers to do so. And it's great that, I'm happy that we brought bike share closer. At the same time, just putting a station nearby is only the bare beginning of the relationship that we need to grow over time with some entities and with some trusted community members in the area. So that's only starting now. And I think that as we expand in new areas, that'll only be more important because the honest truth is that 98% of our efforts every day are focused on running the system we already have, kind of thinking of this as a bike transit system and trying to achieve high reliability. Did that address that directly enough, Cameron?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And I think, we can help spread the word, and I put people on here are partners. So I think that I understand the whole being able to leverage partnerships to help as your staff is already booked doing what they're doing. I think that makes total sense. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. And if it's okay, I'll kind of follow up a thought on that by just highlighting that I feel like I kind of sit in an interesting seat, which is that we as Boulder BCycle and I personally have been responsible for running this system in a smaller town, and we've run it both as a nonprofit and now as a for-profit as part of BCycle, which is the bike share division of Trek Bicycles. And really, it's just that what hasn't changed with our business structure change is that the vast majority of all of our operating revenue needs to come from riders paying to use the bikes, whether that's directly from the individual paying or through any sort of membership program like at CU or through employers or like the grant funded one we have with BHP. That's really what we have to keep our eye on moving forward. In the industry at large, there isn't a lot of interest right now in terms of public subsidy going into private shared micromobility. And kind of regardless of what people might think about it, it just means that as an industry, we really have to focus on making sure that our fare box recovery is much closer to 100% than to, whatever it is, 20 or 30% that a lot of transit agencies are able to observe.
Right. I think that last point about the employer programs, I think leads really well into Angel's question about if there was any employers and institutions that offer the subsidies and free memberships like Boulder County does, and if you could off the top of your head mention a couple of them.
Yeah, sure thing. I will give big credit to some entities that have had corporate membership programs for now going on, more than 10 years. The county, the city of Boulder have done this. Let's see, Naropa University did for a very long time. Obviously, CU Boulder has only grown in doing that. UCAR and some of the federal labs have provided this access to employees. And then I can also comment on that Google provides it as a benefit for their employees as well. So all of that's been really helpful to us. I think it's safe to say too that some of those membership programs were really helpful while we were still a nonprofit, making it through the first part of COVID. I think, without the larger sort of institutional support that the bike share in Boulder had, it's totally possible that the program here could have closed as it did in plenty of other places during the pandemic when employer or employee usage dropped a lot. We were lucky to still have entities that understood that even if employees weren't coming to work in person or as much, that this was still sort of a benefit or even just a safe way for them to leave their home during the early days of the pandemic and get out and just recreate outside and keep up their health, even if it was no longer like a transportation system to and from work.
Right. Yeah. I definitely know my personal experience with Boulder BCycle went up, or bike sharing in general, but went up definitely during COVID just to get out of the house.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. But ridership patterns have changed, and across the region, but certainly within Boulder, work from home is a lot more common than it used to be. So I think that the way that we talk about those programs with employers has changed, and we've tried to broaden the pitch to employers so that it's as I said, no longer about only getting an employee from like A to B because they're starting and ending at their office, but it could just be more sort of a general wellness enhancing or attractive benefit and health option.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. Cami had a follow-up question. If you could remind us what age someone has to be to use BCycle.
18 years old as of today.
Okay.
That's the clear answer. I personally would love to see us try to decrease that age to whatever age we feel at which people can fit and safely use the bikes. The bikes are supposed to fit people starting around 4 feet 10 inches tall on up. They are around 55 pounds as electric bikes, which actually puts them on the lighter side for electric bikes. But still, that means to say that riders do need to be large enough to feel like they can confidently control the bike. I personally would really, we've talked this through with Boulder Valley School District a number of times. If it would be possible for us to either add a rider to or a waiver or something to our rider agreement to let younger riders use the bikes. But as it stands today, riders have to be 18 in order to basically sign our user agreement on their own and start riding.
Thank you. And I think the last question in the chat is from Whitney. She says, would you mind giving a quick overview about how to check out and use a bike? Say someone is brand new and wants to go and use for the 30-minute time window. What happens if they go over 30 minutes? Are there any stations with non-electric bikes that they might end up struggling to use maybe?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, it's so helpful to just give an overview of the basics. To start at the end, we don't have any stations with pedal only bikes anymore. The whole system here in Boulder is pedal assist class 1 e-bikes. So they're all the same model of white BCycle class 1 pedal assist e-bikes. We also limit them at present to 15 miles per hour of assist, knowing that as a whole, we're still relatively early in e-bike adoption and that we still have people who are taking their first e-bike trips on these bikes. So if somebody was taking their first trip on one of these bikes, let's say this is going to be an app user who holds a credit card, they would download the BCycle app. In that app, they would see all the various purchase options for everything from that single ride pass where they're paying per 30 minutes on up to our annual membership. If they choose that 30-minute pass, they basically make that purchase by finishing their BCycle account, and then they use the app to actually check out a bike at the station they're standing at right then. And then within the app, they can do the route planning to their station at the end. The app will then track like their usage. They'd be able to see over time the history, the duration of their trips, the charges they've had. And if they choose to opt into it, they can even see the specific GPS recorded routes they've taken. So yeah, we try to, I think the one-stop shop for most riders as of today is download the BCycle app. It has everything you need to purchase the pass, as well as use the system. And it's also what gives you real-time system information. So we're out there every day, redistributing bikes between stations, swapping in charged batteries. And our goal is always to have a charged, in good repair bike available at all stations at all times. We often fall somewhat short of that because we have 56 stations as of today and 300 plus bikes. So we're constantly shuffling them around and watching the patterns to hopefully move as few of them as possible, burn as little fuel as possible moving them around, but also make sure they're available. And so with that, the app gives you that real-time information that would let you see if the station closest to you or closest to your destination has a bike for you or has a dock available to put the bike at the end.
So it is required to have a smartphone, or with like that library pass I was thinking that you mentioned?
Yeah, that's the big asterisk on everything I just said. So for most people, please start with the BCycle app. If you're not using the BCycle app through the library pass program, if you're through our low-cost access program or Boulder Housing Partners program and have chosen to request a key fob instead, you don't have the real-time system information in a mobile app then, but you can still look up the same information like embedded in a live map on our website. So you could look at boulder.bcycle.com and see our current system information as of now. Yeah, so that's one of those things where it's genuinely because someone's going to have the best visibility into the system that we encourage them to use the app.
Sure.
But we can make sure that people without an app using it, they're just not seeing that same real-time info in the palm of their hand as they would using an app.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, one other thing I can add there, Whitney, is that we feed out the current status of the system info via something that most transit agencies use called the general transit feed specification. There's a general bike share feed specification. And so if you're using, for example, transit app, you'll see you can turn on the bike share layer and see the current status of bike availability at stations.
Cool.
Cool. I had an add-on question to Whitney's question.
Yeah.
Say you're using the bikes and you route your destination, but you get to your destination and there's no dock stations available. What do you do in the case where you might have to go to like the next furthest one, or
It's a great question because this does happen. So we're always out there balancing to try to make sure there's a dock, but during times that there isn't a dock available where you're going, we ask that people either, if you're in an area where there's plenty of station density and it's not more than a couple minutes out of the way to go to the next nearest station, we ask people to bring the bike there. Technically, riders are responsible for the bike while it's checked out to them, but we want to help them, get on their way and also return the bike in a way that's safe. So we ask people to bring it to a nearby station if one exists. If that's not feasible, every bike has a cable lock on it and with a small key. What we'd ask people to do then is to lock up the bike at the station where they're trying to go or very nearby with that key, and then either most likely keep the key with them, and we'll make an effort to recover that from them. We'll adjust the time of their trip so that they're not charged overtime fees for that. And in an absolute worst case scenario, they don't return the key to us. We recover the bike and replace that key ourselves and put it back into service. Yeah, I guess Melissa, I can add one option there, which is that if someone, for example, was like stopping in for an errand somewhere, like a grocery shopping or a haircut or something, if they simply lock the bike up so that it's not going to be stolen during the time they're running their errand, and then bring it back to a station later and let us know, we'll adjust a trip so that they're not charged any overtime fees for it.
Okay, even if that trip was over a half hour, if they've like locked it up safely in the meantime.
Yep. Yeah, that's really the main concern, right? Is we're trying to make sure bikes are available for everybody at all times. We're also trying not to lose the bikes. So, but we understand that we need to be flexible too, in terms of that we do require people to bring a bike back to a station. And so it's on us to make sure that docks are available. If not, then we'll help to make that accommodation and, get back the bike however we can.
Cool. Thank you. And I think we have 2 more questions. Do you provide any new or irregular e-bike users any education on how to ride safely?
This is one where I want to deepen our partnership arrangements with people, because we do not, as of today. Whenever we're doing group rides or, whenever we have a chance to reach a group of people and start to introduce them to the bike, we will. But other than a walkthrough in the app, there's no one standard program that every new person to the system has access to in terms of like familiarity with an e-bike or these e-bikes specifically. So, we would be happy to provide, we haven't done this yet, but anytime there are bike like safety or education classes taking place, like we'd be happy to provide a BCycle that someone can include in there as an example bike for new riders. Anything we can do to try to increase that, but the honest, truth of that for us is that we don't have on the ground local staffing to attend a frequent number of events like that.
So Kevin, I might just share real quick that I know nationally they're pulling together kind of a work group, discussion group around e-bike education messaging and or resources. So if you'd like to be a part of that, I'm happy to send you the information when it gets scheduled. So you can attend if you want to come learn from others who are also trying to figure this all out.
That would be great. Thank you, Cameron. That would be really helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting to be, we've been doing this for such a long time in Boulder that it's easy for us to approach this with a high level of familiarity about these bikes. And yet we know that e-bikes are still new for many people, and that hopefully the promise of e-bikes is that they're more accessible than our traditional pedal powered bikes were. And so we're aware that we're inviting more and more people to try it, and we want to do whatever we can to increase the level of comfort and familiarity that go along with that. I saw that Angel asked where to scan a key fob for a rider using a key fob. Because our whole system is dock based, it's the docks that have the fob scan locations, and the location differs a little bit depending on the generation of the dock at the station the rider's using. So our Some of our older equipment it all has a silver button on top of the dock, just the side differs, and if it's toward the front or the back of the dock, depending on the dock's age. But there are decals on each dock that should show the rider where to basically wave that key fob once they've woken up the dock to check out a bike.
Okay, cool. And so if people were interested in getting the fob, they go to the library and then they can use the fob at the little dock thing, wherever the little sign out part is.
Yes, for someone using that library pass program, what's actually available are key fobs. They're in DVD cases on the shelves there, and the DVD cases contain system use instructions. And so there's actually a photo in there of where to scan the key fob. Since we know those riders may be newer to the system, those would be library pass program riders using the key fob. If someone's on board through our low-cost access program or Boulder Housing Partners and they're a key fob user, then because we've corresponded with them to get them signed up for the program, we can also provide that one-on-one level of conversation about how to use the fob to check out a bike.
Cool, awesome. Okay, I think we're just about done. If anyone has any last minute burning questions, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, thank you, Kevin, so much for your time. It's very informative. I think people are very excited to learn more and start riding.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you everybody for being here and for listening. I mean, I think I love doing this. I've been working in this for a long time. And yet I feel like we know what we do well, and we can only grow better through doing conversations like this, through fielding questions, through fielding requests. So thank you all for taking the time to listen and engage.
Yes. All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Kevin.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.